Do you want to talk a little bit about Bernie's massive rallies, and then we can get to everything else? Because I do think that's a little bit of an exciting note that we haven't been able to talk about since I've been gone. And that's the fact that the Sandman is still kicking ass and taking names. Man, I'll tell you what. I've said it a million times that like, oh, we have to think of somebody new. We can't just constantly go back to Bernie. But the waves of people speak for themselves, guys. I'll vote for him. I'll get in line. I'll get in the tank. I'll knock doors. I'll phone bank. I'll do what it takes. I think if he picks a young vice president, somebody who's like 42, 43 years old, fuck it, why not? So get him to run for president again.
Yep, I'm in the exact same boat, Zach. I think that Bernie right now is proving that, like it or not, he's still the leader of the left. And at this point, I think maybe the leader of the entire Democratic Party. Again, whether anybody likes it or not, deal with it. Who else is going around the country giving rallies like this? Here's some photos from the overflow crowds in Iowa City. Bernie Sanders has been going on a nationwide tour to fight oligarchy, and he has stopped in Nebraska and Iowa. Obviously, Iowa is a pretty symbolic state, pretty meaningful place to begin the tour. And yeah, so far the rallies have just been overwhelming, really, really epic sight to behold, and something that does make me, feel more optimistic about the future of this country. It makes me feel like, not to sound like an accelerationist or anything, but almost maybe like, would this even have been possible if it weren't for the very ugly reality of authoritarianism that we're being faced with right now? I said this at the time, and again, I hate to sound like an accelerationist, but the only good thing about Donald Trump winning is the sort of opportunity to reset that it gives the Democratic Party, right? Like, hey, this clearly isn't working. The Kamala Harris, Joe Biden kind of brand of Democratic Party politics just ain't working. This does, I think, give the American people an opportunity to say, all right, what will work, what actually is a compelling alternative to Trumpism and the populism of MAGA. Well, I think it's pretty obvious what that alternative is. And I think it's pretty clear that Bernie Sanders has been 100% vindicated, not just by normal people, but even by liberals, folks like James Carville and fucking Neera Tanden, people that have been out here who were huge villains of the Bernie movement, that now are basically singing his praises and saying, hey, this guy's actually unironically leading the way. So yeah, I think this is huge. This should not be understated. And in addition to this, we also have lots of energy around the country, rallies. We have, people making their voices heard at town halls in very aggressive ways, standing up against the Trump administration, and specifically Elon Musk, who's made it even easier to engage in this sort of a crusade just because he's so unlikable, just because he represents everything that Bernie Sanders has been warning about.
Yeah, I think that you're on to something right there, where basically we have been presented with the outcomes of what has been, which is Donald Trump further entrenching the oligarchy than honestly I ever thought possible in such a short amount of time. I really did not foresee the world's richest man essentially becoming the marionette master of our president, being gifted a golden sledgehammer to go and destroy entitlements, and also something else, being able to completely destroy our national park system. Hello, that's something that freaks me out. Gavin and I love the national parks. I've been a long-time advocate of the national parks. So is Gavin. I think it's incredible. I think that it's the only good thing Theodore Roosevelt really did with his time in office, when he wasn't doing, raping and pillaging and expansionism and all that jazz, right? He was like, hey, let's go ahead and do this, right? So that's good. And we really enjoy the fact that they were available. And now you have, because of what anti-Chinese racism and, supposed budget cuts, you're saying like, oh, too many Asian people are coming to use our national parks. Why are Americans going to fund them? Anyway, not to get into the weeds on that, but you just have so many different realities that people would have never expected, right? Like, I never thought the national parks were up for grabs. I never thought we were going to fire the only locksmith at Yosemite. I never thought there were going to be 9-hour waits to get into the Grand Canyon because they fired all the staff, right? And now you have Medicaid getting slashed. I mean, I don't know how many Why I Left the Lefters were like, Josh Hawley and the Republicans and MAGA, they're going to fight for the working people, and they're not going to have any of these entitlement cuts. And it's like, of course they are, you dumb fuck. Wake up. They all fell in line. Every single House Republican fell in line and voted to defund Medicaid. It's crazy, right? They're cutting OSHA. They're cutting workplace protections. They're making, they've got Sean O'Brien supporting right to work, in the poorest states of the country. And what does that present to the American people? It presents the opposite of what Bernie Sanders ran on, and it validates every warning he gave. What did he say? The nation is falling into an oligarchy. The few are controlling the many, right? It's the 99% versus the 1%. And right now, the 1% have all the power. And what are they doing? They're coming for your health care. They're making it more expensive to get an education, right? They're taking away the public services that we've all come to love and cherish about this country, the few of them that we have. And yeah, I think in hindsight, it makes Bernie Sanders look very prescient.
Oh yeah, 100%. I totally agree with what you're saying about the national parks too, because I think that's just an example of something that a cut, in the budget that almost nobody would defend. Why? In part, at least because I think, national parks are something that everyone in this country can enjoy or at least appreciate as far as the economic value that it brings their state. There's a lot of right-wing kind of rural areas or parts of the country that, the whole economy relies on these national parks. I mean, there's literally some states like Wyoming or Idaho. Like, what the fuck else are you going to do in those states other than go to a national park? There probably would not be even a tourism department in some of these states if it weren't for the services offered by the national park. And I think that, I forget who said it, but, this whole cutting government spending thing, like, it should be applied like a scalpel in a way that American people won't really understand or realize. They got rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Maybe you're not going to notice that. But instead, they're basically...
Except for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, it's based.
Oh, it is. But I'm just saying, I think they could have gotten away with getting rid of it just because, unfortunately, most people don't even know what the fuck it is, right?
Yeah.
You go up to your average person on the street and start talking about the CFPB, and they're going to look at you with a dead stare. National parks, bro, everyone's been to the Grand Canyon. There's a chance your first fucking memory is looking over the gorge of the Grand Canyon. You know what I'm saying? Like family vacations, trips, and the economy thing. Even if you don't have childhood memories of going to national parks, what if that's the thing keeping your fucking state in business, right? Because that's the part of the country you live in. Instead of the scalpel approach, they really are just taking a sledgehammer. And it's crazy because, again, I think they could have gotten away with so much and not faced much of a public backlash. Like I said, if they had only focused on some of these agencies that people aren't as familiar with, people that they might have heard of, but they don't really understand, I think they could have gotten away with that. I think they could have been a total conservative, anarcho-capitalist wet dream where they, defund the Department of Education even, and like some of these departments, but they've really gone too far. And people are going to be pissed. And I think that is fueling this rise we see in the crowds that Bernie's getting when he goes out on these sort of tours. I mean, if he came to Kansas City, I know that we would be first in line to see Bernie.
I hope he does, dude. Nobody ever comes to Missouri. I feel like they're always like, oh, that stupid fucking red state. We're not going to get anywhere there. But I hope Bernie decides to put us on the map. He went to Nebraska, which isn't exactly a burgeoning blue state. So I hope you're right. I think the other big thing that people are going to start to really wake up to is the fact that every single thing that Donald Trump is doing comes back to his own personal enrichment in a way that's getting increasingly brazen. He was hawking his hats from the White House, Oval Office. He's putting out this weird gold card where if you buy a $5 million gold card, you can get green card status in the country. I mean, things that just sound gauche. Things that just sound corrupt, right? Even Republicans in this country, they like to believe that we have this mythology, right? That we're somehow a great nation, that we're, divine by God, that we have all of these, norms and, things that make us better than the rest of the world. Basically, this makes us look like a cheap third world country that'll do anything for a bribe. And that's exactly how Donald Trump is running it, right? It makes us seem like we're being run by gangs instead and run by cartels instead of by a democratic government.
Yeah. And this shit's just so weird too. Like Trump selling these stupid hats. Bro, you already won. You're the president. Why are you still campaigning? Why are you still trying to make money off of your stupid supporters? Like, you already became a fucking multi-billionaire with the meme coin thing. Like, really? Why do you need to get a few more bucks selling Trump was right about everything hats? Again, you're the fucking president. Is there no other way for, like, doesn't he literally now just get foreign governments pouring money into his fucking coffers to put hotels in their cities or whatever as a way of like obvious blatant corruption? Why do you need to sell these stupid hats? It's so embarrassing. It's so beneath America. It's so beneath the presidency. But yeah, the only other thing I'll add as far as the Bernie conversation before we move on is just that I totally agree with you. He should, and I know a lot of people in chat might, be like, come on, are you ever going to move on? But I do think that Bernie is the leader of this movement still. I totally agree with you, Zach, that he should run for president, but announce a running mate, a vice president, early on. That way people know, like, okay, it's Bernie plus AOC, or it's, Bernie plus Jasmine Crockett, or Bernie plus fill in the blank, right? There's a lot of qualified people out there that are younger, that would bring something else to the ticket, that would make people feel like, okay, it's cool. Even if Bernie keels over and dies, we'll be good here. I actually think that would be a formidable challenge, because the thing is, guys, we can't have a Mitt Romney or Kamala Harris go up against, Trumpism, MAGA, whatever you want to call it. It needs to be a powerful, dynamic ticket that speaks to the, economic angst in this country, that kind of speaks the language of populism and anti-elitism, that singles out oligarchy and oligarchs like Elon Musk in a way that's not cowardly. We cannot have a Washington Post style Jeff Bezos approved Democratic nominee. You know what I'm saying? That would be a fucking disaster.
Oh, I mean, and that's been borne out multiple times, right? Again, it goes back to the fact that we never even had to go down the Donald Trump road, right? That's why I say we see our two different realities. We see the one that we're going down now, which was Trump, Biden, Trump, disaster, right? Well, what happens if in 2016 the Democrats don't rig the primary? What happens if there were no superdelegates? What happens if Bernie Sanders was the Democratic nominee, as he rightfully should have been? Guys, if any of you in this chat doubt me, if any of you guys, maybe you were young, you didn't really follow the Democratic primary in 2016, I want you to go and look state by state who got the most votes. Borderline, just numbers. Who got the most votes? It's clear as day. It was Bernie Sanders. The superdelegates, all of the manipulation that they did behind the scenes, they gave Hillary Clinton the debate questions in advance. Okay? They did everything to roll out the red carpet because it was her time. Well, guess what? Bernie Sanders still got more fucking votes from her, so they had to come out with another way to cheat it. Okay? So if that had not happened, if the Democratic Party had followed the principle of their name, democracy, we would have had Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump in 2016. And let me tell you, it is not up for discussion. It is not, it would have been close, but probably Bernie would have won. It would have been a landslide. It would have been an ass whooping. It would have been a total clobbering, even with all of the, pissing and moaning Hillary Clinton Democrats that stayed home and decided not to vote because they were so unhappy with the Bernie bros getting their way, just like they did with Barack Obama, right? A lot of people stayed at home in 2008. More people who supported Hillary Clinton in the 2008 primary stayed home and did not vote for Obama than people who supported Bernie Sanders in the 2016 primary stayed home and did not support Hillary Clinton. So if you want to talk about who gets bitter and who doesn't vote, it's really it's the right flank of the Democratic Party. But if we'd gone down that more just road, we would have had things like potentially student debt cancellation, right? We would have had a way different Supreme Court majority, right? Potentially a stacked Supreme Court majority. We would have been able to handle COVID so much more effectively. We would have had testing. We would have had masks sent out to everyone via the post office. We would have definitely still gotten stimulus checks. We would have had all kinds of good benefits, and the American people would have been presented with an alternative vision, which is one that's rooted in community and taking care of one another, instead of one that's rooted in selfishness and business and bottom lines. And unfortunately, we did not take that route, but we still have time, right? Donald Trump's era will end, and we still have time for one term of Bernie Sanders where we can start to right the ship and hopefully establish an heir.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I really hope that he does it. And also, I think the elephant in the room that, again, it kind of sounds shitty, but it's true, is I don't even think he would have to like do that much. Like, I don't even think it would him running would be all that much more physically challenging than what he's already doing right now, right? Like Donald Trump kind of proved, and so did Joe Biden, that like you actually don't have to have as big of a ground game, as impressive of a ground game as people pretend. Like Vivek Ramaswamy had like 100 times the ground game in all the primary states, and he came in like fucking 7th place, right? This guy was actually knocking doors. This guy was actually setting up campaign headquarters in every county in Iowa and like going over the top to try to boost his name recognition. It didn't fucking matter. In both elections, the candidate who did the least amount of work actually won. Joe Biden and Donald Trump, right? And that's mostly because of name recognition, something that Bernie Sanders has over basically every other Democrat in this country. So he actually doesn't have to break his back. He doesn't have to go to every fucking county. He doesn't have to shake every hand and kiss every baby. He can kind of just run an online campaign, a basement Joe kind of campaign. But Bernie Sanders, obviously, still doing rallies, still doing outreach, and having, surrogates also helping. But I don't even think it would be that physically taxing on him the way some people pretend that running for president is. I think we're in a different era, and maybe that's a bad thing that, people with high name recognition can just coast into a nomination. But I do kind of think we're there, at least with the Democratic Party, where there's so few actual leaders that it's like, I think leaders. A lot of people would just get behind Bernie. He wouldn't need to prove anything to them. They would just be there. And like, I was at lunch a month ago with, someone I went to high school with, someone I wrote on the high school paper with on the staff. And she was not political at all. She didn't give a fuck. She thought it was like funny that I was so into Bernie at the time, but she didn't care. Right now, she's like, "You still like Bernie, right?" And I'm like, "Of course I still like Bernie." She's like, "Me too. He's the only one I like." Still fairly apolitical person. This is not a liberal. This is not a Republican. This is just a straight up normie person. And she's like, "Yeah, Bernie's the only person I like in politics." And I honestly think that a lot of people feel that way, left, right, center.